Welcome to the Pencil Bob channel. I hope you enjoy my stories.
It all started with a simple email notification. I was sitting at my kitchen table, sipping my morning coffee, when my phone buzzed. It was an email from my HOA management company. I opened it, expecting the usual monthly statement or maybe a reminder about community events. Instead, I was staring at a notice about late fees, $685 worth of late fees, to be exact. My stomach dropped. I'd been on autopay for years. How could this be happening? I immediately pulled up my bank account on my laptop, my fingers trembling as I typed in my password. I scrolled through the transactions, searching for the HOA payments. There they were every single month, like clockwork. The 19th of each month, the same amount deducted from my account. I'd been paying them faithfully since 2020, so why were they saying I owed late fees? I grabbed my phone and called the HOA management office. The phone rang and rang before finally going to voicemail. I left a message, trying to keep my voice calm, but I could hear the frustration creeping in. Hi, this is name from address. I just received a notice about late fees, but I've been on autopay for years. I've never missed a payment. Can someone please explain what's going on? I'd appreciate a call back as soon as possible. I hung up and stared at my phone, willing it to ring. But it didn't. Hours passed, and still no response. I decided to dig deeper. I went through my email archives, searching for any communication from the HOA. Nothing. No notices, no warnings, no letters. The first I was hearing about these late fees was this email. And $685? That wasn't a small amount. It felt like a punch to the gut. The next day, I called again, and again, and again. Each time, I got the same voicemail. I left more messages, my tone growing sharper with each one. This is name. I've called multiple times now. I need someone to explain why I'm being charged late fees when I've been paying on time. This is unacceptable. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, I got an email back. It was from the account manager, a woman named Linda. Her message was short and to the point. According to our records, your payments have been late since February 2022. The late fees are valid, and the amount owed is $685. Please remit payment as soon as possible. I stared at the screen, my blood boiling. How could they just drop this on me without any explanation? I fired back an email, my fingers flying across the keyboard. Linda! I've been on autopay since 2020. My payments have been deducted on the 19th of every month without fail. If there was an issue with the due date, why wasn't I notified? This is the first I'm hearing about these late fees. I need a detailed explanation and a resolution. Her response came quickly, but it was no more helpful than the first. The due date for HOA payments is the first of each month. Any payments received after the 10th are considered late and incur a $25 fee. This policy has been in place since 2022. The late fees are valid, and the amount owed remains $685. I felt like I was hitting a brick wall. How could they change the due date without notifying me? And why had they continued to accept my payments without saying anything? I decided to take matters into my own hands. I printed out all my bank statements, highlighting the HOA payments. I also printed out every email I'd sent and received from the HOA management company. I was going to fight this. I reached out to a lawyer, a friend of a friend who specialized in real estate and HOA disputes. His name was Mark, and he agreed to meet with me the next day. I brought all my documents with me, spreading them out on his desk as I explained the situation. Mark listened carefully, nodding as I spoke. When I finished, he leaned back in his chair, tapping his pen against his desk. This is a classic case of poor communication on their part, he said. They changed the due date but didn't notify you, and they continue to accept your payments without informing you that they were late. That's on them, so what do I do? I asked, feeling a glimmer of hope. First, we'll send them a formal letter demanding an explanation and a resolution. If they don't respond or refuse to waive the fees, we'll take it to the next level. But I think we have a strong case here. I left Mark's office feeling a little more hopeful, but the fight wasn't over yet. The next day, I received another email from Linda. This time, she was more defensive. The due date change was communicated to all residents via a newsletter sent out in January 2022. It is the responsibility of homeowners to stay informed about HOA policies. The late fees are valid, and the amount owed remains $685. I felt my anger rising again. A newsletter? That was their excuse. I hadn't received any newsletter. And even if I had, How could they expect everyone to read every single page of every document they sent out? It felt like a cop-out. I forwarded the email to Mark, who responded almost immediately. "We'll send the formal letter today. Don't worry, we're not backing down." The letter went out that afternoon. It was firm but professional, outlining the facts of the case and demanding that the late fees be waived. It also requested a detailed explanation of how the due date change was communicated and why it hadn't been notified directly. The response came a week later. This time, it wasn't from Linda. It was from the HOA board president, a man named Robert. His tone was much more conciliatory. "We apologize for any confusion or frustration this situation has caused. Upon reviewing our records, we see that the due date change was communicated in a newsletter, but we understand that not all residents may have received or read it. As a gesture of goodwill, we are willing to waive the late fees for the past 6 months. However, moving forward, we ask that you adjust your payment schedule to ensure payments are received by the 10th of each month." I read the email twice, making sure I understood it correctly. They were waiving half the fees. It wasn't everything, but it was something. I forwarded it to Mark, who called me a few minutes later. "It's a start," he said, "but I think we can push for more. Let me draft a response." Mark's response was firm but polite. He thanked Robert for the partial waiver but pointed out that the issue had been ongoing for much longer than 6 months. He also reiterated that I had not been properly notified of the due date change and that the HOA's lack of communication was the root cause of the problem. The next day, Robert called me directly. His tone was calm but firm. "We understand your frustration, and we want to resolve this amicably. We're willing to waive all the late fees as a one-time courtesy. But moving forward, we need you to adjust your payment schedule. We can't keep making exceptions." I took a deep breath, considering his offer. It wasn't perfect, but it was a resolution. "Thank you, Robert," I said. "I appreciate the gesture. I'll adjust my payment schedule moving forward." After I hung up, I felt a mix of relief and frustration. Relief that the fees were being waived, but frustration that it had taken so much time and effort to resolve what should have been a simple issue. I couldn't help but wonder how many other residents had been caught in the same situation. I decided to take action. I reached out to a few neighbors, asking if they had similar experiences. To my surprise, several of them had. One neighbor told me she'd been hit with late fees too, even though she'd been paying on time. Another, Tom, said he'd received a nasty letter from the HOA accusing him of being delinquent, even though he'd never missed a payment. We decided to band together. At the next HOA meeting, we brought up the issue, presenting our case to the board. It was tense at first, with some board members defensive and dismissive. But as more and more residents spoke up, sharing their own experiences, the tone began to shift. By the end of the meeting, the board agreed to review their communication policies and make changes to ensure that important information, like due date changes, was communicated more clearly and directly. They also agreed to waive late fees for any residents who had been affected by the lack of notification. It wasn't a perfect solution, but it was a step in the right direction. As I left the meeting, I felt a sense of accomplishment. We'd stood up for ourselves and made a difference. And while the experience had been frustrating, it had also brought our community closer together. We learned the importance of speaking up and holding those in power accountable. As I walked home, I couldn't help but smile. It had been a long and stressful journey, but in the end, we'd come out stronger. And that was worth every moment of the fight.
When you talk to the HOA, ask what address, email they send notifications to and if they change the date. You can show your history and ask for a waiver if it's a mix-up, but you are not the kind of member most HOAs are looking to find to change behavior. You are late because of reasons. Most likely they make an accounting error. Late fee is charged and no notice goes out. Next month, you pay as usual and the late fee is credited first, before your normal fee. New late fee is debited your account. At one point, all your payments will go to late fees and the fee from before and you paid nothing that month. Still no notice sent. Not until they start the foreclosure. If you like our stories, then please like and subscribe and comment, and remember to hit that bell icon so you never miss out. We have new stories almost every day. It all started with an email. Just a simple, straightforward email from the HOA. But it felt like I'd been living in this townhouse for 15 years, minding my own business, keeping to myself, and trying to be a good neighbor. I'd never caused any trouble, never had any major issues with the association. And I'd always followed the rules, or at least the rules as I understood them.
But now, out of the blue, I was being told to remove my security camera and solar flame light from the exterior of my home. The email was polite enough, but it was firm. It stated that the camera and light were in violation of the HOA's rules and regulations, and they needed to be taken down immediately. I read it twice, then a third time, trying to make sense of it. The camera and light had been there for 2 years. 2 years, and not a single word had been said about them until now. Why the sudden change? Who had complained? And why? I sat down at my kitchen table, staring at my laptop screen, my mind racing. The camera was a Blink camera, not even a Ring doorbell. It wasn't obtrusive or ugly, just a small, discreet device mounted near my front door. The solar flame light was even less noticeable. It was a 1.2-watt light, barely enough to illuminate the walking path next to my porch. It wasn't a floodlight or some blinding beacon. It was just there to provide a little extra light in an area that had always felt too dark, especially at night. I'd installed both of them for security reasons. Over the past couple of years, I'd had some unsettling experiences. Strangers had been coming around late at night, jumping onto my patio, knocking on my door, and then running away. It was unsettling, to say the least. I'd started to worry that someone might try to break in or steal something. The camera was there to give me peace of mind, to let me see who was at my door without having to open it. The light was there to make the area feel safer, to deter anyone from lurking in the shadows. And now, the HOA wanted me to take them down. I felt a mix of emotions: frustration, confusion, and a little bit of anger. Why was this suddenly a problem? Had someone complained? If so, who? And why hadn't they come to me directly instead of going to the HOA? I'd always tried to be a good neighbor. I decorated for Halloween and the holidays, but I never went overboard. I kept my yard tidy, my trash cans out of sight, and my noise levels reasonable. I didn't understand why someone would have an issue with my camera or light. I decided to reach out to the HOA for clarification. I sent them an email asking for a copy of the rules and regulations they were referencing. They responded quickly, sending me a document from 2008, the year I'd moved into the townhouse. I scanned through it, looking for anything that might apply to my situation. There was a section about exterior modifications and decorations, but it was vague. It mentioned that any changes to the exterior of the home needed to be approved by the HOA, but it didn't specifically mention cameras or lights. I sighed and leaned back in my chair. This was going to be more complicated than I'd thought. I decided to call my neighbor, Linda, to see if she knew anything about the situation. Linda had lived in the neighborhood even longer than I had, and she was always in the loop when it came to HOA drama. "Hey, Linda," I said when she picked up. "Have you heard anything about the HOA cracking down on exterior cameras or lights?" "Oh, yeah," Linda said, her tone sympathetic. "I heard they sent out a bunch of emails about it. Apparently, someone complained about a few houses having cameras and lights that were too intrusive. I guess they're trying to enforce the rules more strictly now, but my camera and light have been there for 2 years," I said, frustration creeping into my voice. "Why is this suddenly an issue?" "I don't know," Linda said, "but you know how it is with HOAs. One person complains, and suddenly everyone has to deal with it." I thanked Linda and hung up, feeling even more frustrated. If someone had a problem with my camera or light, why hadn't they talked to me about it? Why go straight to the HOA? It felt like a passive-aggressive move, and it didn't sit well with me. I spent the next few days weighing my options. Part of me wanted to just take the camera and light down, move them inside, and be done with it. But another part of me felt like that would be giving in too easily. I hadn't done anything wrong, and I didn't want to set a precedent where the HOA could just dictate what I could or couldn't do with my own home. I decided to send the HOA a response. I kept it polite but firm, explaining why I'd installed the camera and light in the first place. I told them about the strangers coming onto my patio late at night, about my concerns for my safety and security. I also pointed out that the camera and light had been in place for 2 years without any issues, and I asked why this was suddenly a problem. A few days later, I got a response. The HOA acknowledged my concerns but reiterated that the camera and light needed to be removed. They said that while they understood my reasons for having them, the rules were clear. Any exterior modifications needed to be approved, and my camera and light hadn't been. I felt stuck. I didn't want to cause a big fuss, but I also didn't want to just roll over and give in. I decided to try a different approach. I reached out to a few of my neighbors to see if they'd be willing to support me. I explained the situation and asked if they'd be willing to write letters or emails to the HOA. expressing their support for my camera and light. To my surprise, several of my neighbors were more than willing to help. They understood my concerns and agreed that the camera and light weren't intrusive or problematic. A few even admitted that they'd been thinking about installing cameras themselves. With their support, I drafted a formal letter to the HOA, outlining my case and including the letters from my neighbors. I also included photos of the camera and light, showing how discreet they were and how they didn't detract from the appearance of the neighborhood. A week later, I got a response. The HOA had reviewed my case and decided to make an exception. They agreed that the camera and light could remain, as long as they were kept in their current locations and didn't cause any further issues. I felt a huge sense of relief. It had been a stressful few weeks, but in the end, I've been able to resolve the situation without having to give up my security measures. I sent a quick email to my neighbors, thanking them for their support, and then I went outside to adjust the angle of my camera, just to make sure it was still pointed exactly where it needed to be. As I stood there, looking at the small, unobtrusive device, I couldn't help but feel a sense of satisfaction. I'd stood up for myself, and I'd won. And maybe, just maybe, I'd set a precedent that would make it easier for my neighbors to do the same in the future. You never want their full copy. You want to get the filed copy with the county or township. That is the only official and legal document. Read it carefully to see how it compares to what they are telling you. I think he means if they provide it to you. My HOA has provided people documents for other buildings on accident. His point is if you get the version from the city, then you have for sure the legally valid document.
I would like to thank you for watching the video to the end. To encourage us to make more videos, please like, subscribe, comment, as well as share. Check out this other video if you haven't already.